Freelancers, small business owners, consultants, and solopreneurs. Some people are just drawn to working for themselves. I'm Owen Roth. In this show, I have conversations with self-employed folks about their career journeys. Welcome to the Bossless Path podcast. And here we go. Today I'm joined by Craig McPherson of CNC Wood Cutters here in Corvallis, Oregon. Craig, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Owen, for having me on your show.
Yeah, this should be good. So tell us a little bit about what you do.
So what my business does is provide computer-operated and mechanical and graphic design services to businesses and individuals within Oregon, throughout the United States. So I have customers all over the U.S. What we do is we have computer-operated machines that, like I said, design. We download the design, and then the machine from there takes over and produces a product or engraving, cutting. So we have clients that come to us with parts that need to be made for their equipment or for a product that they're developing. So our machines can cut those products accurately, produce high volumes, and get that client or business back in operation or to market fast. So that's sort of the key element of our business is, we're highly accurate and we're extremely proficient in timing to produce a product for our clients.
Yeah, okay. So that it sounds like a lot of prototyping for things, yeah.
So we do get into some prototyping. So I work with a lot of entrepreneurs that are developing a product. They've got a hand sketch. They don't have a digital file or a design of it. So I'll work with them to develop that digital file for them. We'll make the prototypes. And usually I'll have the client will schedule time and they'll work with me right within my shop of doing the fit and functionality of it if it's a product that assembles together and has interfacing parts.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't realize people actually came to your shop and got some one-on-one time with you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's either they come to my shop or I've had clients in other states where I'll set up a Zoom call and then I'll share my screen or they'll share their screen, their ideas, and then basically from there we'll do a takeoff of the mechanical or graphic design. And then sort of, that sort of helps expedite the whole process if I've got them involved with me, plus they have some ownership into it. So, that's not what I wanted. It's always what they wanted because they're involved with me during the whole manufacturing and design process.
Yeah. I remember that when I went over and talked to you and saw your shop, that's something I remember you saying is part of just a smart way you operate your business is you try and get that buy-in, not like manipulatively, but like to get that buy-in from your clients so like you have more retention and you're not just like investing a lot of time and then they're like, no, thanks.
Well, it's really it's hard to extract someone's idea out of their head. They have a vision, but with that vision, they don't have the tools to create the vision. So that's where I become the medium between them and their idea.
Sure.
And that's it's a unique trait that I've been able to develop over the years of, having design jobs, having big, I was in the automotive industry and the engineers would come in with these crazy ideas and you would have to extract that idea and then hit the target, and sometimes it was, here's a part, build a machine around that part. And trying to hit that idea that engineer was looking for was always a challenge. So, that's where a lot of this practical experience comes into play with my business is, past experience of, how did I navigate that to hit the target for the idea? So
right, yeah. Do you have any things that you've developed as far as techniques, as far as how to extract that idea and really translate it into the physical product from the client's mind?
Really, it always boils down to a concept, and I have to create a concept. If you come into my shop, you'll see it looks like a museum. There's all kinds of little gizmos and gadgets. A lot of those are prototypes that I had to develop to get the client to that point of purchase or get them through, this is the first rendition, here's the second, a lot of those parts are those phases of those, progression in those projects with those clients. So that's creates a good show and tell, but it is a good story to a lot of people's products that are coming through there. That sometimes they bring their materials, and I maybe only get one shot at it, so I have to be a lot more cautious. Depending on the value of the materials, and just understanding what their budget is too.
Sure.
I don't want to drag somebody through a $2,000-3,000 prototype process when they have a very low value product and they don't have a lot of money. So I have to understand my clients' capacity, of money and budgeting, and their big picture. A lot of people don't understand what the cost of materials are. And that's the other thing, is they have this grand idea that has a lot of materials, and then we look at the material costs and it doesn't pencil out. So that's another thing that I'm trying to help them with is, what does this cost not only to manufacture, but to purchase the raw materials to make. So
Sure.
there's a lot to it that a lot of people sort of skip some of those steps with excitement.
Yeah.
And that's you got to reel them back in and say, okay, let's work together. I want to make sure you're making money and I'm making some money so I can stay in business to help you. And that's a big part of my business is, navigating that for the entrepreneurs, not necessarily my business clients. My major focus is business to business,
Okay.
but I still have those entrepreneurs that, I'm an entrepreneur by heart, so I want to help that person. But the sort of the sad thing is you see is, about 70 to 80% of those people with the ideas is just not feasible once you really get down to it, and cost and what they can resell. Going through Etsy, or I have a lot of clients that try to go through that, but they don't figure in the cost that Etsy takes from their products. So, it sort of washes out any kind of profit margins and that, and a lot of these people have corporate jobs. And that's the other thing that is cool to see is a lot of people want to progress out of that corporate world and get out on their own. So that's, I'm always a cheerleader for that. So I'm always jumping in like, how can I help you? Cause that's sort of the route that I went, is, get out of the corporate world. Let's go out and do our own thing.
Yeah, well, we're going to get into that here in a little bit. It's really interesting to hear. The customer service element of the project management seems to be a very large part of what you do, or a large part of what makes you successful, right?
Right.
I visited your shop, and you've got like CNC machines, laser cutters, right? Laser engravers. What's all?
So I've got a couple different size CNC router machines. I started with a smaller machine and then realized that I couldn't really enter the true market if I was to go all in with the smaller piece of equipment. So I had to scale up, get out of my garage. So then I went out and purchased a larger 4x8 machine that I can put a whole sheet of plywood on, which that opened up bigger projects. Obviously, going out of a house, now I've incurred a cost of renting a space.
Sure.
So that has helped offset those those spaces. And these machines are paying for themselves. Every time I get a project that it's got a good return. So I'm always positive that every time you get down, you're like the phone rings and the big job shows up, and you're like, that's why I bought that machine.
Yeah, exactly. The payoff's right there.
So I have those.
Well, before you go on, I'm not sure we fully explained what CNC does. So basically, for example, you would have like a wood block, and I think you can do metal as well with CNC, or
you can with a different style machining center. It's more robust.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yours do wood. So you would have like maybe a big wood block, and then the machine like is automated, like with a little drill head.
So the machine, everything's going to start in a square blank. You're going to create a blank, set that up in your machine, but you have to process how that material is going to be removed. So that's part of the computer numeric control, CNC.
Yeah.
So what you've got to look at, okay, what's your finished part? How do I process through that to get to that final point? So there's multiple cutters. You're going in and trying to remove as much material as possible right off the bat to finishing, a radial corner. It takes a certain diameter bit or style of bit. So there's multitude of bits and drills, all kinds of tools, but you have to understand how to process from raw material down to that finished part. And it could be, 10, 15 programs. It could be 2 or 3 programs. But depending on the complexity, how many times do you have to change the tools to get there? So that's sort of the challenge to it is developing that process.
Sure, sure.
I mean, you get things out of process, it won't work. Depending, material on, wood, some wood will chip or flake. So you have to do pre-processes before you get to that final process, and it has to be in a certain order. So it's really challenging it, but obviously the more processes, the more time you create, the more cost. So
yeah,
there's always a give and take there.
Yeah, that balance. Well, I do want to touch more on that, but once you finish off explaining what else you have, like as far as your machines and what you can do.
Besides the 2 machining centers I have 2 different lasers. I have a laser that can engrave into metal, which would be called a fiber laser. And it's more like a camera lens, and there's a focal height of a distance from the bottom of the lens to the material will establish a laser that will cut or engrave. If you get out of that focal point, it won't react on the material. But basically, that machine is like metallurgy. So you're changing the composition of the material when you're hitting it with this laser. So different materials act in a different way. So you almost need, there's 3 different settings in that one. And you have to create like a cookbook to get the repeatability out of it. So if I'm dealing with stainless steel, there's 3 different settings for that stainless steel to react to a color that it'll either engrave it or change color on the surface. So I have to understand what the client wants. So that one's always a little bit challenged. I don't use that one enough to be like super proficient with it, but I'm pretty good with it. But like I said, you have to keep good records, to get repeatability. Because when a client comes in and you do something once and they come back and expect the same, you've got to have a good record. How did I do that first time to match the second time if it's 6 months down the road? So that's another thing within my business is keeping good records and data management and how did I get there? Do I need a recipe card or can I just freewheel it? And so you have to determine especially even between clients, there's expectations different. I'm dealing with a jeweler, or I'm dealing with a guy that's just making birdhouses and he wants a little metal sign. So you really have to understand your client and how you handle some of these projects.
It's almost like you're a private chef. That's like, you're like, oh, here's this person I'm cooking for. Here's this person, and this person expects perfection.
Yeah.
This person's got a little bit more tolerance, and then I go back to this client A from client B, and I have to do exactly what I did for client A as far as what I give them.
You have to be able to read your client's expectations, and get that documented so you can meet it. Because if you don't document it, it's hard to meet expectations when you don't capture in the beginning of what's the outcome.
Right. Right.
And that's I have a large project management background, so I've learned a lot of that through my project management of contracts and that you need to define what the scope of work is, and the starting point and the stopping point is huge.
Yeah.
But even on that's a bit of my job is showing that visual example of what the outcome is. And that's the other way you can write it down, but you need to show them what it looks like at the end before you do it. So I do a lot of digital rendering, to actually simulate what the finished or end product would be.
Right. Yeah. And that's a whole nother skill set that folds into it. Yeah.
That's that one laser. The other laser that I have within my business is a CO2 laser, and basically that does more wood engraving and cutting, more plaques, a lot of prototyping. So there again, this tool is very useful for industry. So we've got a lot of lumber mills and lumber processing companies in the area. And this is just an area that I came across. They have a lot of wear items in their machines, and their machines break, and these wear items are made out of plastic. And what I found is that a lot of them do not have digital files. They have physical parts, but they don't have digital files. And when these machines go down, it takes their business down. So I've worked with a couple of them of taking those high wear parts that are critical to their equipment and reproducing them. And with that laser that I have, I can make templates sized, 1-to-1 that they can actually bring back, put in their equipment to prove out, okay, it fits right. Because all I'm getting is either a damaged part or a part, but some of this plastic's $1,000 a sheet, to make sure that I make the part right before the sheet comes, or I make a bunch of junk. So that's sort of an advantage that I have with my machining background in that, and understanding tolerancing to make those templates, provide it to them. They fit it. Yep. Sign off. Again, covering myself of, producing something, having them, sign that, yes, this is what we want. It fits. And then we go and machine it. So I'm always trying to cover that between, it's helpful, because when you get to those points of not covering, yourself or the client, I'm always trying to look out for that client to prevent that, oh, we spent all this money and now it doesn't work.
Yeah. One thing that's really striking to me about what you do is, like, you must be really good or have become better at, like, managing how much time and effort you need to put into a given job with a client, right? Because, like, I actually see some similarities to that, to creating videos like I do. A lot of the work is that I would call it pre-production for video, but it sounds like it's probably about the same for you, is all that stuff before the actual product is made, right?
Right.
And yeah, you must have it relatively dialed in now, like how you're going to allot for that, your time, like when you're presenting the client with, here's what the cost is.
Yeah. A lot of that is, upfront talk that, hey, there's going to be design involved. And a lot of people understand that if they're truly serious, I've got to get that commitment, because I've got to spend some upfront time. And sometimes I'm not getting the money upfront to do that conceptual,
Right?
Because it's going to take them, to get that deep, to get them to buy, to see that idea or the vision come to fruition. It's hard to do that verbally. So, I do spend a large amount of time with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, in my cost estimates, I have line items for design, for machine setup, and I try to show them and be very transparent instead of just giving one number.
Yeah.
And they can't allocate the cost to that number. It's hard for someone to make that purchase if they can't see how it's broke down, because they can relate to, if I had to do it in my garage and not hire him, how much time would it take me, and what's your time worth, right? And that's, I think, when you show them that level of detail, they really understand the level of effort that has to go into making that. And that's a good bit of why I involve some of the people in my shop. I know a lot of businesses that are similar to mine. You come in the front door and you never go in the back. You can't see what's going on. And that's what I try to educate my clients, that here's the process. There's the raw lumber. How's it going to get to that final part? And, sort of walk them through and educate them. I think that's a big part of my business, is educating the client, what is that level of effort? Because obviously money's always the bottom line, is, man, that's expensive. But if they understand why it's expensive, they're more apt to work with you. So I really find that as an advantage to me, is, being able to, because I'm the one doing it all. It's not me, and then, like, it just goes back there, and when it comes out and it's done, well, it doesn't work that with me, because I'm fully involved through the whole process.
Right. Well, we'll get more into that. Why don't we jump to how you got here and the path that you've taken to get to where you are today? Can you go back to the beginning of your working career?
I was influenced as a younger age. I was into racing motocross, and was into, want to go fast, but you're 14, 15, and you're racing against guys that are, in their 20s that had jobs and money. And my dad was in the Navy, and my whole family was in the Navy, and they were machinists. So I had that exposure of being around machinists, that people could make things with their hands, not only with metal, but with wood. So it was always intrigued me that they never had to pull in an outside resource to make the things they needed. So I always found that as, attractive to me in career-wise. So I took advantage of the vocational schooling through the high school that I was at. They had a machine shop in there, so I basically started monkeying with that and was able to work on my race bikes and do all, be self-sufficient with that, and
Yeah.
the mechanical aptitude always intrigued me. So went through that vocational, found that vocational school worked with some tool and die companies in Michigan. So I'm from Michigan, and that opened some doors to interview with some large tool and die companies, and then that opened up for the apprenticeship. So that was a nice thing where the apprenticeship program was a 4-year program. They paid for my college if I maintained a certain grade. So that was the nice thing. I didn't incur a bunch of college debt. My company paid for my college. I went to school for 4 years and received a journeyman's card in tool and die making. And by the age of 22, I was a journeyman tool and die maker, and I was leading guys that were 45, 50 years old.
Wow.
And I was very ambitious. I've always been very ambitious not to be stagnant. I never wanted to be stagnant in my career. So I met that threshold of that goal of getting my journeyman's. The next progression in that was I'm looking at blueprints, and I'm like, why aren't I drawing these blueprints? So I went to the owner, and the squeaky wheel always gets the grease. If you don't chase future goals, you become stagnant. So I went to the owner and I said, I want to draw all these designs. And he said, well, go up front. There's a computer, draw them. He says, the only caveat is you draw them, you go out and build them. So that was how I cut my teeth in design was drawing my own tools and then having to go build them. And then, I should have did this.
Yeah.
I should have done that. Right. So that those learning experiences were huge,
Yeah.
Not only I didn't have an ego that I was trying to uphold that I was, a college engineer and degreed and all this. I wasn't degreed. I was just, the grunt on the floor that wanted to progress, but I had the real world experience. And not having an ego allowed me to go out to people with 30 years experience and ask them, how would you do it? And then help me navigate solutions. So I was leveraging knowledge from real working people. So that was sort of the progression from the journeyman tool and die maker to the die designer. So I went from, I had one AutoCAD class in that community college through that apprenticeship, which allowed me to take it to that next level. And from there, it was just circumstances of running into the right people at the right time. The next progression was automation, robotics, and assembly equipment, still working around the automotive industry.
Yeah.
And I just sort of kept going in progression of what's my next goal? I wish I knew 3D software, and boom, I learned it. And I'm like, all right, what's after this? I'd like to learn, project management. So, I just kept progressing through those. You'd see jobs, you'd search Indeed or whatever, and man, how do you get there? How do you get that job? And I think you keep digging, you get there, and that's sort of what happened with me. Is I had all these years of experience, and that's what it really boiled down to. Some of my bigger jobs that I had with the nuclear industry, I had missile defense systems. I managed a large missile field in Alaska. So let me get back to being my own boss here.
Sure.
So in 2004, I was in automation, the largest plastic injection mold maker in the United States.
Yeah.
And I was the design manager at that time. And we were designing, so the major company was developing all the injection molds for the interiors for Ford, GM, Chrysler, all the interior plastic parts, the dash, the vents, all the plastic parts in there.
Sure, lots of them.
And at that time, I was the head honcho running a group of designers, following my design process. And I had like an epiphany, like I'm getting burned out. I was getting burned out, and a sales guy came in, and this guy, he always come in with donuts, and he was happy. He was like, "Hey, Craig," he's all happy, and I'm like, "What are are you guys hiring or something? I want to be happy like you, because I'm not happy."
Yeah.
At that point, I had sourced a job to this individual, and he was supposed to be designing this high pressure, quick turnaround job, and he disappeared, and he never told me. So when the deadline hit, I wasn't doing enough checks on him because I was busy with my own team. Went to check on him. He had made no progress on it.
Wow.
And basically, the firm I was in said, "Well, you sourced it. You finish it and get it done." And it was in a software that no one else knew, and I was the only one that knew it. And basically, they had isolated me in a room. I lost control of my team, and they forced me into this room where I couldn't have any visitors, any interface with anybody until I got that job done. And I said, "This is terrible.
Yeah.
I don't. That's not who I am." It just really made me upset, and
Sure.
just happened to come out of that room, and like I said, I ran into the sales guy. He's
Sales
got
guy.
the donuts. He's happy. I'm like, "Dude, I need to change. I mean, I'm not happy." I went through about a depression because of that grind that I was putting myself in, the responsibility at a younger age. I think it was in my mid-20s, 24, 25.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I was very depressed, drank a lot. Just wasn't happy. When the guy that shows up at the party and all he wants to do is talk about his job,
Mm-hmm.
and it's sort of a Debbie Downer. Everybody sort of avoids you when you start doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it was the turning point of why I went out on my own. And so that day, I told that guy, I was on the bathroom break, let's go meet your dad. His dad owned this sales company, and it was an automation sales company, and they were selling air cylinders and all the gizmos that I was putting in my tools. So I understood what he was selling. I was using those tools. That's why he was coming in there. He was the main supplier I was buying the equipment from to put in my machines.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a good understanding.
Sure.
And I'll never forget, he took me over, and I had this card book. Like, I was keeping cards of like all my GM and all these big high-end clients that I was
Business
dealing.
cards.
Business cards, yeah. And I'm like, I got a book of business already. Like, cool. And so we go over and we meet his dad, and his dad says, yeah, I'll hire you. So I came back to the shop that day, and I said, "You know what? I'm done." And I quit.
Yeah.
And I was dating a lawyer at that time, and the guy's dad said, "You need to get a business set up," and he said, "You might want to do like an S corp or something." So at that time, I was dating this lawyer. She writes my articles of incorporation.
Wow.
And I started, it was 2004. I had a S corp.
Wait, I'm confused. So you're starting your own business, but I thought you were working for this.
I was an independent contractor, 100%. The gig was 100% commission. I didn't understand that. I was at that point. I'd been pushed too hard
Mm-hmm.
and was burned out that anything was better than, that book of business, those cards was like my Willy Wonka's gold ticket. I was like,
Yeah.
I got this. I mean, and so I quit and got that all set up as the independent sales guy, and went on this mission. Like, well, first off, I brought those business cards to the owner, and I said, "Here's my clients." He's like, "What are you bringing to the table?" And here's my clients. And he had a marker, and he started putting a dot on every one of those business cards. And I'm like, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Those are our clients. They're our house clients. They're not yours." So everyone that I thought I had, like I could go out and cold call or call them up and say, "Hey, let's do business," because I've been building their machines using their products,
Yeah.
and I could, fill in the consumables and make that money. And yeah, so come to find out, I have no clients, so it's completely cold calling. We go 6 months into this job, and the owner says, "Don't use your engineering experience. You're selling tools. You're selling product." So I went 6 months. I didn't make a penny, right? I got a house. I got a new car payment. I went from this job that I had guaranteed money to 100%, commission base, and I'm not making any money.
That's scary.
And so I'm panicking. So I resulted back to what are my skills? Design. So I went and tried that approach to a company. The first time I did it, I got a $30,000 project right off the bat.
Wait, you're using those skills to sell?
To sell. So I'm drawing in what I'm selling. I'm presenting it to the client in a visual form of not here's a flyer or that. I drew it conceptually.
Yeah.
I was prepared myself. I knew what the company had and prepared myself before I went in, and then showed them a visual of what I was selling.
Yeah. Okay.
And that changed the whole dynamics of everything. And so I called back. I'm all excited. The owner, I get back to the shop, and the guy's got a non-compete. And he says, you got to sign this non-compete because we think you're going to, make a product that, we're going to make. And they thought I was going to compete against them.
Because you drew up this design.
Yes.
As a sales tool.
As a sales tool.
Oh.
So they wanted to like crush me on that, because I was going to make money on the design side for my effort, right? I had to pay for that time. And so anyways, ripped that thing up. I was done with that job. But what I had learned was I had to go back what I was good at, and it was design. And that's what that whole lesson was. I'm going to go out and sell product, and the guy says, don't use your design, your abilities to sell product. And when I did that, I failed miserably. So when I went back to the design side of things, that was, that told me it's a visual thing that people buy on visual. If you can present them and it's useful and it's visual, they will purchase. So it was a aha moment, like, why was I,
Yeah. Well, but it got you out of what you were doing because you were miserable.
Yeah.
And then you got pulled out and you got pulled into a situation which wasn't really ideal, but at least it pulled you out, right? And then it made you learned something there from that experience,
Right.
even if you didn't make money or find direct success.
Right. Well, I think that's a big part of where I'm at today is taken those chances, having failure.
Yeah.
Creates opportunities. I mean,
Yeah.
you have to go back sometimes and look at the toolbox you're carrying. What's in your toolbox? Don't overlook your toolbox of your skills. And that's
Sure.
what I was happy with is I'd created those base skills. I had something to fall back on to go take risk. If I didn't have what was in my toolbox, the lessons that I learned in failure, I was able to always step back in line to what, was in my bag of tricks, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of my, failures or trials, were learning experiences that got me to the point where I am now of, having a business, understanding how to operate that business, but, reinventing yourself and I had lost the fear of failure.
Yeah, that's huge.
Once you can get over that fear of failure, you can take a lot of risk, but they have to be educated risk, right? You have to have a little money in the kitty in the backside, or like I said, go back to your toolbox that if it fails, I can always jump back in line and go back to the design house, right? So that was sort of once you have that sort of eliminates that fear of failure.
So true. So you were in sales, quote unquote, even though you didn't sell much, and then you realized you had to go back to design. So what'd you do next?
So next, the company I was at calls me up.
Which
the one that I'd quit to go into the sales.
Yeah.
They said, "Hey, we've got a job. We need your help." So I went. Then the next realization was I went from $22 an hour to $45 an hour coming in as an independent contractor.
Okay.
So I started I created, I restructured my business. I'm not going to go out and do sales. That's a bad idea because I didn't have enough. What I saw in the sales world, the lesson of sales is there's a lot of sales guys that are buying sales. They're buying golf tournaments and food and
right.
There's a lot of carrot baiting, there's, and I didn't have the money to do that.
Right.
So back to the tool set of, all right, I can do design. And I started cold calling, said, you know what, I've been in the automotive industry, but why not the food industry? And one day I showed up at I was cold calling and it was about 7:30 in the morning. I pulled into a food integrator packaging company. and was going to go beat on the door. Went up there and beat on the door. Nobody answered. I come back out and there was a guy sitting in the car. And he says, "Who are you? Do you know these guys?" Long story short, he was the head engineer for Dean's Foods and a big dairy producer. And he says, "I'm here to meet these guys, but they're not here. Who are you?" And I said, "Oh, well, I'm a designer." And he says, "You know what? What kind of designer?" And I told him, and he said, "You're going to design my next project."
Really?
And I said, it's one of those being in the right spot, the right time, still going out, not giving up, still grinding.
Yeah.
You will eventually run into the right person. And that moment, I ran into the right person. It was $1 million project.
Sitting in his car trying to.
He's upset that they're not here. He's got a meeting and
That's so funny.
So he forced that integrator to hire me as the designer and it was for Walmart and Dean's Food. They were developing a new milk jug that didn't require milk crates. They were losing so many of these milk crates. Everybody's got 10, 15 of those milk crates in their barn or wherever. They were stealing them, right? And then not only that, when they would bring the deliveries of milk, they would be at the 7-Eleven. They'd have to drive a truck back up there, collect all those cartons, and then wash them, store them. So this whole product was to eliminate the need for these crates. So it was a pretty big sustainable project for them. It was, we're going to do environmentally friendly and, save all this. And so it was a pretty cool project. So I was able to design it, source it. So I had, all those backgrounds and manage the installation for the company. So I was able to play 3 parts into the project and build, tremendous knowledge and opportunities to, reinvent myself in a whole different market and make a name for myself.
So you're drawing on all the skills and now you're working for yourself as a contractor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got my independence. I can work at home, and this is in 2006, 7 era. And, so it progresses on. So that was sort of my bread and butter was, I was finding clients out there. I was building, designing automation, doing a lot of that. And then the market slowed down in 2008. It was in Michigan. And Michigan's economy sort of rolls around the automotive industry. And when that sort of declined, I was in a circumstance of, again, here, like sort of out of work, sort of getting a little nervous of, what's my next step? Here I am. I don't have a full-time job. I'm all self-dependent. And phone rings out. It's always when you have self-doubt, good things happen. If you can't, you have to stay positive, like always looking for the positivity of life. And my phone rang, and it was the next opportunity. And the next opportunity was, have you ever considered of moving to South Carolina? Sounds interesting, tell me more.
Yeah.
And this was a nuclear program, and I'd never worked on nuclear, but it didn't matter. What they were looking for was years of experience. Almost 80% of the nuclear industry is 65 to 80-year-old men.
Really?
That have that experience because they've shut down a lot of the nuclear programs in the United States after 7 Mile and all that. They sort of dwindled down of the nuclear plants or producing any kind of new nuclear programs.
Right.
And there was a treaty between Russia and the United States of the disarmament of nuclear weapons, and they were going to take this fissile weapons material and produce it into fuel rods. And this was the project that I was getting asked to come down. And so really the driver on the opportunity was, how many years experience do you have? Because they couldn't find any younger people that had 10, 15 years of experience in design and manufacturing. And this is in 2008-9 era.
Yeah.
And that was my qualifier to get into it. And they flew me down there, and I think I had to take a actual CAD test and passed it. And they said, "When you moving?" So I picked up, reinvented myself. I didn't really know what I was getting to. They didn't give me a lot of information. It's like, "Oh, you're going to go through all this training." I roll in the first day down there, and they give me a stack of design drawings like that. And they said, "Reproduce those," and it's all written in French. So all the,
French. And
so I had to have a translator with me, a French translator, to help me navigate and reproduce all these drawings for this project. And so this goes on, and the next opportunity, because I'm always, looking for, I don't want to be that stagnant designer. I did not want to be, because I went from an independent contractor. Now I'm into a full-time job, and I never wanted to be in that scenario. I wanted to be that independent contractor. So the next best thing was, okay, what's the next opportunity? They were starting to release these designs for manufacturing, and no one there had any manufacturing experience at this site working on this project. And so basically, I had volunteered that, hey, I have built tools. Let me go out in the field and oversee the construction of this project. And so basically they said, all right, you're our guy. So wherever they sourced the project, I would fly up there and embed myself within the company and help them navigate that project all the way through, any kind of manufacturing hiccups. As long as it wasn't, it required a engineering approval, I could make the change on the fly and keep them in the manufacturing process. So I went through that. But what that opportunity opened me up to was networking with people I would have never met all over the United States within these big companies.
Yeah.
So my network of people all the way through this whole experience really goes back to meeting the right people for the next opportunity.
Right.
And that's really what I started to see was, all right, if I meet these people, build that relationship, be helpful, not combative, and work with them, not against them. I saw a lot of my comrades that were doing something similar, and I would go into their companies they were overseeing and look at the combative nature they had going on with their client. It was counterproductive.
Yeah.
So, always, it's like having the older sister learn from their mistakes and implement the best of both worlds, right? And
right.
So that's sort of, I always looked at what could you do to make the relationship better or, to your advantage, and not only your advantage, but to, the clients that builds that bond,
Yeah.
trust. Trust is everything, right?
Yeah.
You can meet a lot of people, but if they don't trust you, you don't have much.
Sure.
So that was really what I'd started to learn through the struggles I had of, sales, that sales job. If you didn't have a friend, you ain't buying, So
Yeah.
to get the opportunity at somebody else's dollar working through another company allowed me to start making those relationships.
Yeah.
And that's sort of through that project landed me here in Oregon.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
So I had worked for a company up in Clackamas as a field engineer on this nuclear project.
Clackamas, Oregon.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oregon Iron Works was the company that I was working for, and they had a contract with the government on this nuclear project. And so the project finally got defunded during that Fukushima tidal wave hit one of the nuclear power plants in Fukushima, Japan, and the power plant blew up, and it had our fuel prototypes in it. And once that blew up, it killed the whole project. It lost funding.
Oh, wow.
So everybody got spooked of it and
Sure.
didn't want to progress it. So here I am again, that the project, here I was thinking, I'll retire out of this. This is a pretty cool gig.
Yeah,
And, it loses its funding.
Yeah.
And
Which is a great example of, like, even though you might work for someone and people think of security as through employment, it's like that's not always the case, because your employer can go out of business too.
Nothing is forever.
Right.
And that's what you have to remind yourself. A lot of people get fixated that they don't progress in their career, or they become stagnant because, I'll ride this out and we'll retire from this.
Mm-hmm.
But, things change, and they change rapidly. So you always have to be prepared for change.
So what did change look like for you then?
So at that point, here I meet my wife in Portland, and like, I just lost funding on this job, and my job came back and said, there's still a portion of it funded, and that's in Utah. Would you like to move to Utah? And I don't really have a choice. It's either Utah or South Carolina. And here I'd met my future wife, and I sort of posed the question, I'm here, but I've got to leave. Do you want to come? And here's my options. And she said, I can't go any farther than Utah. And so we moved to Utah, and that job went on for about almost a year there. Loses funding again, but I get a 6-month notice that, hey, after 6 months, you're either going to have to go find a new job or move back to South Carolina.
Yeah.
And so that 6 months, I had, prepared for this. And that's what I always had done, was prepared myself for the next move. Once I started realizing, the networks and all the people that I'd met, and the opportunities to work for yourself, it was like, all right, I got 6 months to come up with a plan.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to my wife and I said, it was my girlfriend at that time.
Yeah, future wife. Yeah.
And I said, let's start a business. And she said, what do you want to do? And I said, you're not going to like anything I want to do, because, I want you to have some ownership. This part of that, always trying to get someone to get some ownership in something.
Mm.
And I said, when I come home from work, you tell me what you want to do. And so I came home that day, and she said, I want to print T-shirts. And I'm like, you want to print T-shirt? We're going to print. That's our business. So we had booked. We looked on the internet and found some printing shows that I think it was in Long Beach, California, and booked a flight. Went to the big printing show. The plan was go there, take all the classes, learn as much as I could about every piece of equipment, and by the end of the show, determine what equipment I wanted to purchase and make the purchase.
Wow. Quite the commitment to just like, oh, we're going to do T-shirts, and then you jump right in and literally jump in.
Well, I knew with my design background, it could migrate into graphic. I was already watching some YouTube and started like, how can I make this transition? I had some cousins that owned a huge print shop in Michigan. So I had a little bit of leverage there where I could go back and say, what do you guys think I should do? And try to get some advice. It's like going back to your parents, should I make this purchase or not? Well, did you think about this?
Yeah.
So I've always been that kind of person that would go back and, before I made that unrational decision, to really go out and leverage, your connections, your network, right? Go back to your network and say, what do you think I should do? I mean, even at this point right now, I'm looking at a new piece of equipment. I've got a friend that's got a piece of equipment, and I'm having him look at my decisions. What do you think? You've got the experience. I don't. I don't want to step in mud if you've already stepped in mud, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You've got to be a little bit smarter.
Yeah.
So I've always sort of played that the way I make decisions.
Yeah, but and it sounds like you do that, but you also, through those experiences you had to that point of starting this T-shirt business with your wife or future wife at that point, you also are drawing on your life experience of like being able to not be afraid of risk.
Right.
Because maybe, I don't know, want to speak for you, but I'm guessing that maybe when you were in your 20s, you might have not made that decision to just like, oh, my girlfriend suggested we start a T-shirt business. Let's jump in.
Didn't have enough experience in the trade that I was in. Once I'd reached that experience level, then the risk sort of went away because, like I said, I could always jump back in line. I was at that level of expertise, experience, and just basic confidence. Right?
Yeah.
Confidence is huge.
Oh, absolutely.
If you don't have confidence, it's hard to do a lot of things.
For sure.
Having confidence that you can, go design $1 million project, or you can handle $1 million project, or whatever it is, that takes a lot of confidence. It's not, $100 or $500. It's big money. And when mistakes happen in big money, those are big mistakes, and you pay the consequences.
Yeah.
You get a bad name and that's, definitely something that I've always protected in my whole working career is my name.
Yeah.
If you got a bad name, it's hard out there. It is hard because in the world that I'm in this manufacturing world, it's a small group of people. A lot of people are interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
But back to the story.
So you got this T-shirt business now.
So I take all the classes. We walk out with $60,000 of printing material. We're living in an RV at this point because I was traveling on the road. I had a house in Michigan, but all this road travel, to go rent a apartment and then, move and sell all your stuff or drag all your stuff with you. So I figured out, I was getting per diem to live. The easiest way to be more mobile would be to live in this RV. So at the point we go to the show, I don't have a place to land the $60,000 worth of equipment I just purchased.
Yeah.
So in between that purchase, I said, let's delay the shipment until I find a place to land it. So I bought the equipment, delayed the shipment, found a place to land it, found a house. It's like a 1,500 square foot home.
In Utah?
In Ogden, Utah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Up above Salt Lake.
Yeah.
And we didn't have any furniture. And
Well, you don't need furniture. You got printing
I
equipment.
had 3 rooms. I was like, I got lots of room. I got a warehouse here. And, the lady obviously didn't know what I was up to. Thankfully, she left right before the shipment arrived that day. All the equipment
When you
showed.
say the lady, you mean
The lady I rented the home from.
Yeah, the landlord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If she would have knew I had a business going on, I just, it was a risk, and I thought, I can't get a big warehouse. I need to consolidate. Now I don't have a guaranteed income. I can only afford one, rent payment. I can't go get another building. So we basically outfitted this house, put plastic on the carpet, over the carpet, and set up a printer, shop, and started doing networking. And there again, didn't know anybody. It's hard to do business in a town that you don't know anybody. So the fastest way to get up to speed is join all your BNIs, your network, your chamber, and that's what I sort of now took, like, hey, I learned all the valuable, properties of having a network. Now I've got to create a network from scratch, because I can't take all these people out here that were in my toolbox. Now I'm in a whole different genre. I reinvented my whole career now.
Yeah.
How do I convince people that I don't have 20 years of printing experience to do business with me?
Sure.
So that's where the importance of getting out there, being present, getting involved with the community. And I really learned a lot there of, that was that lesson in life was you need to get involved. You can say you can go and you don't go, but if you go and you start meeting the people, then that network starts to grow. And within, I think, 6 months of that business, I had over 400 customers in that business.
Wow.
I was printing stuff for. And it was quite amazing. Like, wow, super pumped. I was, super excited. And my wife gets homesick. And I have a successful business going.
Yeah.
And I'm ready to start growing. And her daughter was going to have some kids and back here in Oregon. And I want to be back home. And I said, man, it's going to be rough. But, I couldn't battle that. I didn't want to battle that. I didn't want that grind, because I knew that fear of failure was gone. I could go back to doing whatever I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. So we packed up the gear and headed back to Oregon. I hit the Oregon state line, my phone rings. I get the job from my network that I worked with, the company that I was doing field engineering up in Portland, calls me out of the blue, didn't know I was moving, calls me out of the blue and offers me a job to manage this missile defense system over the phone. I just crossed the line. And that's how things work.
Pretty fortuitous. Yeah.
It's just timing. It's everything will play out all right in life. I mean, the worry, people worry so much. And I think that worry, you can manifest a lot of things. You can manifest, if you have self-doubt, you can manifest that nothing will go right for you. If you have positive, future and outlook, I think things just produce, and it's amazing. The funny thing was, I'm in a U-Haul, my wife's in my truck. She gets a call a little bit later, someone that she knew up in Portland, out of the blue, offers her a job. And here we are on the road with no future. Like, it's a little bit, it's scary. It's like, where am I going to put all this printing equipment? I don't have a house I'm going back to.
Was it the plan to move the whole printing business to Oregon and then?
I was just going to put it in a storage unit.
Oh, okay. And then you just figure
it out. You're just like, all right, I got to get it together here. I have to figure it out. And so.
Okay. So you both get offered jobs.
That following.
On your way to Oregon.
Yeah. It was like Friday, and then Monday you're going to start your job. So I'm like, I fell right into it. It's like unbelievable. So, it's all about who you know and who you meet, and in those relationships. I mean, that's really the point and the moral of the story is, you have to be good to people and you have to help people, and making those relationships is huge. Because the worst thing you can do is not ask for help. Even if that point in that phone call wouldn't have came, probably would have picked up the phone and asked, hey, you guys got anything going? I think a lot of people fall on the sword if they don't ask for help. I think everybody wants to help people. I think that's a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't ask for help, you're not going to get any help.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So you're back in Oregon. You're both you and your future wife is both employed in Oregon.
Yep.
What's next?
So we're living in the RV trying to figure out, I've exhausted a lot of money in that business. I wrapped up. I've never taken any loans for business. I've always self-funded myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I've got a good savings habit and that. And so we worked through that. We're living in an RV and I'm in Alaska. The client was in Portland.
Yeah.
And the project was in Alaska.
I see. Yeah.
So I'm going up at a month at a time, and my wife's back, I think in Troutdale, living in this RV.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm making, this job's paying extremely well. We probably should have been living in a home, but, we're minimalists. We don't need a lot to survive.
Sure.
And she calls me and she says, the drain plugged, and having a meltdown. And I said, you know what, now's time. Let's go get, something, a home to live into. So we migrated out of that. And so that project went on for a while and super stressful. Only imagine when you get into nuclear work and any kind of government with high criticality, the amount of paperwork, the amount of understanding of process procedure, just the technical side of it.
I can imagine, yeah.
Is extremely, it's not fun work.
Yeah.
And that's what I started to figure out was, it was fun. It was fun being the client. It wasn't fun being the manufacturer. It's a whole different animal, And I always warn people like that, if you're on the client side and you're barking at the guy doing the stuff for you, now put yourself in the shoes that you're barking at.
Yeah, the receiving end.
Yeah, it's a different animal, and a lot of people have a hard time making that transition from being a client to the manufacturer. Mm-hmm. Because there's two different sets of responsibilities. There's a lot of freewheeling going on as the client. You could ask for the world, but in reality, on the manufacturer side, there's only so much you can deliver. Within expectation and cost, right? So that's always been, that was the sort of thing I had come across was like, it was a better experience being the client than, because they were leveraging me down the road. I had worked on this missile project, but the project that I had worked on prior, when I first connected with them, was coming back alive. So they saw the advantage of having me as the prior client be on their side of the table this time around.
Oh, I see.
And basically when that came back alive, then the fun of the job sort of washed away because I didn't have enough resources to manage the project. Plus, it had been mothballed for a couple of years. It was in storage, and having to unravel things that were in partial process was very complicated.
Yeah.
And, the people that were involved in the beginning didn't want to be involved this time around.
Yeah.
And so
I see
murder mystery going on.
I see another life change coming up for you. Yeah.
Yeah. So, we were out, I think we were down in Bend hiking, and I got a phone call. Once again, a phone call. Just timing. Those timing, I don't know how it happens and why it happens. Catch you at your vulnerable times. And a gal called me and said, do you ever think about being a financial advisor?
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, no, but it sounds intriguing. I'm at a turning point in my career right now that I need change.
Yeah.
And, I think that's a lot of people's issues, that they don't listen to that, themselves asking for change.
Right.
If you're not happy, don't continue. Don't do that to yourself. It's not healthy. Stress not healthy. The dysfunction in life with your spouse of not being happy because of your job. So, I said, when can we set up the appointment? So I went down, I went through all that, did all the schooling for my Series 7. You have to leverage a lot of your friends and family, and all my real close family and friends were in Michigan. And the people that I had to
leverage them as clients.
And that sort of helps you get started in that career. Yeah. Well, the family and friends I had out here were real estate investors, not stock market investors. So it was sort of a dead end for me. Yeah. And I sort of realized that, and I said, I got to go back to my toolbox because, this isn't going to work. It's going to take too long. You've got to look at how much time it takes to recoup, especially in the stage of your life. How much time do I have to develop a career that's going to be profitable to make ends meet? I mean, that's really what we're looking at is like, you need to make money. You just can't be stagnant. And it might have been a better career change when I was maybe 18 or 19, right?
Yeah.
You start to realize that. I think that's the lesson that you get is like, should have been doing this. When you talk to the gal that got me into it, how long have you been? Well, since I was 19, 20. Yeah. So then you start realizing it takes a long time.
Yeah, the runway's a little bit too long for your stage of life.
So you have to, be able to pull the eject button. You can't drive yourself down a black hole because.
Yeah. So that didn't work out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't work out.
Yeah. Which is fine.
Once again, met a connection. And that gal that got me into it was the connector and sort of helped me, gave me some guidance in life. And I needed that at that time. I was just sort of I felt somewhat broken or, I was failing. I didn't know anybody. I was in Portland. People weren't open. It's like, how do I get into a situation where I'm around people that are more open to me? And so I went through that trying to, did a couple sales jobs, went back to sales. I did a sales job that.
So you did leave the missile defense, like.
Yeah, I quit that and went and did the.
Yeah.
I just cut it off and said, I'm going to go be a financial advisor. I committed my time. So I wasn't working. I was just studying.
Right. Yeah.
It was,
And then you realized while studying that it wasn't for you.
Right.
So then you had to make ends meet other ways.
Yep.
And
so
reevaluate.
I found this company. It was called K Designers. And I was thinking, designers, I'm going to go back, get in the toolbox.
See the keyword, yeah.
Yeah, design. And they're selling windows and siding, and there's no design about it. It's just selling windows. But I was able to see an opportunity.
What's that?
You sell windows and siding. People, you could talk about it, but if you didn't show them, they wouldn't buy it. Mm-hmm. So I would pull up to their house. I bought a color printer, and I'd take a picture of their house. And then I'd bring it in my design software, and I'd put new siding and windows and shutters on that house. And I'd walk up to that door with that picture. Here's what your house could look like. And it was a turning point. Like, I kept reassuring a picture's worth 1,000 words, and that's the tool. That's the tool. I mean, I used to have companies hire me to go out and do presentations in 3D design that they couldn't, that food integrator that I got working with back years earlier sort of gave me that idea that they were leveraging me as a sales tool because I could present that rendering to make their client buy.
Yeah.
So I went so I started selling windows and siding. I'm like, this is pretty cool. You take a picture, draw it up. There's what it looks like. Wow. How are you selling so much? And I was at grunt level, but I was trying to be the head honcho of the company. I'm trying to go to the owner and say, look at the process I developed.
Yeah.
That you could train your whole entire sales staff. And he wasn't receptive.
Oh, really?
And I thought,
it's like a no-brainer.
I've got my tried and true way. And so and those are the things that you run into that you can't change someone else's idea. And that always forces you to go back to yourself. You can't tell people what to do because they're going to do what they want to do. Right?
You can tell them, but they're not going to do it necessarily.
And I was, I'm just this grunt sales guy, but I had a better approach and my numbers showed it. But, so anyways, that went on and I sort of got frustrated because I couldn't grow. And I wanted to run the company, but
this is assuming you're having trouble breaking through.
You're the grunt, you're not going to be in the group. And I realized I couldn't be in the group. And so I was, reevaluating again. And, my wife's daughter and son were here in Corvallis and obviously had a baby. And my wife again says, man, I'd, like to be next to the child growing up. And came across a job application or a job offer or whatever it was somewhere online. And I called in and the guy calls me back and it was at Hewlett-Packard here in Corvallis.
Yeah.
And
the
guy hires me over the phone as a project manager.
Wow.
Over the phone. When can you start?
Man, this is happening a lot in your life.
And
on the hiring.
Yeah. So I'm like, all right. So I told my wife we're going to move down there. And got things sort of prepped. I had some money had saved, and we bought a house prior to moving, so I was all in, and went down here and basically ran the Hewlett Packards as a contractor. So there's a independent firm that manages their facilities and their commercial construction projects. And basically, I was the director of the construction project. So I oversaw and then hired individuals on my team to follow my process that I developed to complete these construction projects.
Yeah.
So that went on. I did that for 6 years, and COVID came about, and I had to make a choice. Do I continue on here or move on? And I sort of felt that I had reached that ceiling. Again, I was trying to be the head honcho. It always happens in my career, because I think if you put all your effort and you really commit yourself, you can outperform anybody. I mean, and that's what I was doing. I was winning the awards. I was getting the bonuses. I was, outperforming. But when I wanted to be, move around in the hierarchy, it wasn't available. And I was like, I don't really want to stay at this level. I need to grow. And I felt sort of capped out of, my growth was stagnant.
Sure.
Even though I had employees and that and was developing process, but I had all these other ideas that they just weren't attractive to my management to allow for growth. And so at that point, I was like, I've sort of been building this wood shop, and the only reason I was building the wood shop on the side, I didn't want to lose my skills, my core skills.
Yeah.
And I was trying to keep myself fresh. I enjoyed it.
So it was a side passion thing, not even a business.
I was running it as a business because I still had my corporation. I had my entity set up. I was making a little bit of money. Maybe
you had time doing a full-time job of that capacity and this on the side.
I've always been super driven. So, I mean, I've always had sort of a side gig on the side, even, when I lived in Michigan. So this was sort of like extra play money, and maybe I was making $5,000 or $6,000 a year on it. And out of my garage.
To my early photography days, yeah.
So you're like, what could I really do if I if I went all in? What could I really do? And so that's sort of what happened. Was I had an ultimatum and sort of got to make a choice. What's the choice? And my first choice was to leverage what I was doing within Hewlett Packard. It wasn't my passion, but it was. I knew I could make a lot of money. What I was doing is in project management, do commercial project management, be a individual or subcontract myself out and just be a contractor.
Right.
You may end up going up to Portland, 5 times a week. You might have to go to Idaho. You might have to go all over, to find this work.
Yeah.
And you start thinking about quality of life, and you say, okay, I've been a road warrior, living in a trailer, right? And leaving my wife home, and she runs into problems, and you got to deal with that. It strains your relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Can I make more money, being a project manager at that level versus, being a woodworker? And so the woodworker thing was sort of on the back burner of like, it's cool, but maybe it's a hobby.
Yeah.
And, I really have to focus on a career, and you can get caught up in life and that, you have to do a certain thing because that's what pays the bills and what looks good in society, right? There's that representation. What do you do, Owen?
Sure.
And I'm this and that, and you're always trying to be. Well, you're an engineer. Well, I'm this.
Yeah. Inflated ego. Yeah.
You're not like, well, I'm a woodworker. And I used to sit behind a computer, but it took me and it was during COVID, and things, that whole transition it made it hard to enter a company out there as an individual contractor. Nobody wanted to let anybody in the door. And so that really made the decision for me was, this is not feasible. I'm going to starve. I'm not going to find any work out there because, for one, I wasn't vaccinated. So that's a big red flag for any big corporate. And that was the kind of work I was doing, was corporate.
Yeah.
And so I said, you know what? I got to make a decision before I run out of money. I had, that was the one thing that during all these jobs, that was one of the most important things, thinking ahead for the future. How do I not only have the skill set,
mm-hmm.
but create a cushion on the backside.
Right.
And that's what these corporate jobs were doing for me when I would enter back into a job market outside of being an independent contractor. I was able to save money
Yeah.
and put money away on the back end for, through the 401s that they were matching 3 or 4%.
Yeah.
So that nuclear job, that HP job really for 6 years was able to minimize my expenses in life, live very simple, and tuck away a bunch of money.
Yeah.
Because I knew I wasn't going to stay there.
Sure.
But I knew what kind of confidence that would build if you had a nest egg, if something went haywire.
Yeah.
I can always go back and pull some money if I had to.
Yeah.
It protects me for that day that my furnace goes out, my stove goes out, my refrigerator goes all in the same week,
I mean, that's a smart practice, just no matter if you're self-employed or not, like just in general. That's just, yeah. I mean, that's how I was able to do what I'm doing now, is like putting away a lot of money over the years leading into this, where like you have a lot more confidence and like comfortability to be like, oh, I don't have to worry about making X amount of dollars or getting X amount of jobs. So
that worry is a killer, a crush.
yeah, it'll affect you.
It will stop forward momentum because you get desperate and then you have to go back. You cannot pursue your happiness or your dream if you're constantly burdened in your mind about money. That, if something happens, what do I do? The car breaks and I got to go buy a new car. I look at a lot of successful people that have a lot of money.
Yeah.
They leverage other people's money to make money.
Yeah, I hear that. Yeah.
And I've never been, I don't know, it's the upbringing that, we weren't wealthy. And probably their parents went through the depression about saving money and, living within your means, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know how to make, like me, I know how to make a lot of money, but I don't want that burden, that stress. It makes you make decisions that are unnatural to have to fulfill that debt, right?
Right.
I don't want to be making decisions because the bank is calling me, that I've got to go liquidate everything. So that's been a big thing to me, and I think in hindsight that maybe it's somewhat crippled me in growth, but I guess you've got to look at what you consider growth and happiness.
I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
what is it? What is it? Is it having 20 employees and dealing with all that, the nuances of that, or being self-sufficient, having a quality of life and being, able to do what you want to do.
You're not the first person that I've interviewed on this podcast, and myself included in this basket, of like questioning what is like success and why do we like define it as like, bigger and better. Like there's nothing wrong with making an assessment like, oh, what do I genuinely want to be happy? And that's seems like what you're speaking to.
You need to define your life to navigate it. If you can't define it, you're chasing some unattainable goal. You have to set those goals, and in every career advance in my life was a goal, but you didn't just meet the goal and plateau. You set the next goal.
Right.
You set the next goal. And like I said, all those experiences, and I didn't cover, I've had 30, 40 jobs, And always growing up, because our mom and dad and, relatives and friends of their friends always had that secure job. They worked 30 years. You don't jump jobs. That looks bad. We were taught that in my generation, don't jump jobs. It looks bad.
Yeah.
If anything, I would highly recommend jump jobs, but stay within the same field until you get that core skill.
Sure.
It's like the older brother learning from his mistakes, right? You take the good things from Joe's shop, so you go to Paul's shop and you bring some of these things. And what that does, it makes you stand out because you're showing them new ways. It's showing that you're open. You see faults in their process.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you can help them, then you become, that's how I sort of made a high progression quickly in the companies I went into, because it was all those experiences I took from that jump. Jumping around, even through my apprenticeship, they say, oh, you should do your apprenticeship at one shop. I did my apprenticeship at 3 different shops.
Oh, wow.
Till I got my journeyman's.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of unheard of because you can't just transfer. There has to be an opening in the next shop you go to. So it was risk, but, understanding that, there was an opening that I could transfer my apprenticeship and they would pick up my college where I was at. I mean, there was a lot of logistics to it, but those jumps through all those careers, really helped me, visually and mentally, and, the success of one people's and the failure of others, to have all that at your hands and understand it, where to use it and where not to use it. That's huge. That's huge. Because you see a lot of people that have been fixated on that 30-year job. Take them out of that environment and go stick them somewhere new. They're going to struggle because they just don't have that level of experience.
Right. Yeah.
Exposure.
Yeah. They've just been on that narrow rail.
Box.
Yeah.
If you get in the box, man.
Yeah.
I feel bad for you.
Yeah. I mean, if it works for you, it works for you. But yeah. You're not the type of person who is ever going to be in that box. I can tell. You've had a very long and experienced journey, and it's really interesting to hear. What do you see for yourself in the future? Or is it too hard to predict as your life is kind of...
It's ever evolving. Just as being a business owner, you're always trying to expand your market. What's a new opportunity? What other things am I passionate about? And that's really what I'm trying to do, is try to find the things I'm passionate about and focus on those, bringing that into my business.
Yeah.
I have a passion. When I lived in Michigan, I tried to give back to who helped me. And that was the vocational schools. And when I worked within these jobs and I would progress and no longer need all these tools, I would go back to my vocational school and donate it, or go in and speak to them, speak to the children, explain that, there's other paths. It isn't that I didn't go to college. I don't believe in college. The apprenticeship program had a piece of college in it. I didn't get a degree, but I got a skilled trade that will forever be with me. And so that's sort of the next phase of my career. I've recently qualified to become a eligible training provider for the state of Oregon. And so I went through that
very cool
process to become accredited. And so what this will do is people that become unemployed, I have a program out there that the state funds. The state will actually sponsor the student. If they need a computer, they will actually provide a computer. So bit of my training, you need a computer to come into, for the design and that side of it. So that's sort of the exciting thing that's sort of come about. Been putting together my curriculums and my courses, trying to get that, presentation down, doing some role playing. I've worked with a couple of local students here from Crescent Valley and brought them in, not recently, but in the last, couple of years.
Yeah.
But I think that's where I really want to take it, is having that ability to pass on what I've learned. I think it's valuable. I think there's a need for it. I think a lot of people look at these jobs, like I said, I sat behind a computer for the last 10 years, not doing physical labor work, or not challenging myself, not utilizing my skills to show people, that being an electrician or being a plumber or being a machinist, I mean, these are good paying jobs, and they're here to here forever. They're
right.
not, we're going to shut the doors or have AI do this. AI can't do service work. And that's a big deal. I talk about AI. I've been using AI for, some of my proposals and stuff. There is a use for it. It's quite intriguing, scopes of work or process or procedure to capture that kind of stuff. But I don't see it replacing a plumber or skilled trades. It can assist. It can help, line out work or, provide the process to perform the work, but I never see it being able to do actual hands-on, creating pieces that people have that relationship. You cannot put an artificial system to build a relationship with a person.
Right.
That's coming from you and that person. That's a natural. It's the unnatural. I don't think people are going to get what they expect all the time from artificial intelligence. So
yeah. Well, it feels redundant to ask you what your advice would be for anyone considering a bossless path, because you've touched on so many points. But could you maybe hit some bullet points of your advice for someone who's considering a career of self-employment.
Learn a base skill. Learn something that you can always fall back on. Because when you have something to fall back on, it opens the opportunity to take risk. Always have a plan. Look for the future. Don't live for the moment.
Mm-hmm.
You always have to have a little bit of like planning for the future. Like, all right, I've got some security there. You've got to create some security, not only with skill, but with finance as well.
Mm-hmm.
Not being afraid to talk to people. Ask a question. When somebody says, don't ask that, ask it. I will always ask a question.
Yeah.
If I want to know how to do something, I'll call a person, even if I don't know them, that's an expert in that field, and I'll ask them. And you know what I always find out? People are so excited to tell you about what they know.
Yeah.
And there's that's huge. I mean, a lot of people go to these, well, I'm going to go pay to go sit in this seminar. I can pick up a phone. I can go on LinkedIn, and I could start a conversation with, anyone on there and say, could we schedule a time to talk? Because I'd be interested in what you do. And that's what I challenge people to do is, what do you want to do? Yeah. Find someone that's doing what you want to do. Reach out to them. They'll be excited to talk to you. Like if someone reached out to me about my business and they were interested, I don't see them as competition.
Yeah.
I have so much experience they're never going to get to there. So why would I be worried about them? I'd rather help them. Like, here, don't do this. I stepped in mud once,
Yeah.
It's terrible,
You being on the show is a great demonstration of that. You're here telling your story and some stuff behind your business.
Build that network, meet the people. Don't be afraid to talk to them. Learn how to talk in front of people.
Yeah.
Role play. That's why I said that one of the best experiences I had was I went from a nuclear and a missile defense project to selling windows. But what I learned was they had such a high quality sales program with role playing. They had Zoom going on. It was like a 3-week course of sales. That's what I took from it. Yeah. So you could play me down that, why would you do that kind of job? But I took something from it. Like I said, even that financial advising experience, I took something from it.
Yeah.
I know how to manage my finances a little bit better. My HP project management, handling $1 million projects. I learned finance. That's what I needed. I needed all those pieces to that puzzle to create that closed circle to do what I'm doing, to understand, am I making money? Am I losing money? Are these tasks that I can handle, or should I be outsourcing it? Should I hire someone to do my year ends? Should I, what am I good at? You have to understand what you're good at and focus at what you're good at. If you're not good at it, don't tie up time where you could be doing something you're good at. You have to be able to understand what's your thresholds.
Right.
Do I do this or hire a bookkeeper? I know how to do it, but do I know how to do it accurately, or can I manage that much time within my business of actually manufacturing, programming, designing? I'm wearing 6 different hats.
Yeah.
So don't wear too many hats. My worst thing that I'm doing is I'm wearing too many hats. It's hard to relinquish, but relinquishing activities or those tasks requires, substantial money to hire those resources to fulfill those pieces. And right now, within, growing a small business, it takes substantial time to build the clientele, to get discovered, right? I'm in discovery. Mm-hmm. People need it, just don't know you exist. So
right, yeah.
And the cost of advertising is very expensive. So your best bang for your buck, join your network groups, join your chamber, ask the questions, meet the people, engage, and you can save yourself a lot of money on your advertising, And then if you do something good for somebody, ask for help, right? I always say ask for help. And my version of asking for help when I do something or a project for somebody, write a Google review for me.
Sure.
And I tell you what, that has been the best thing that I've done for my business is, getting positive reviews, and make sure, I'm not trying to steer them. Write an honest review, and you see what you get.
Right.
And if people write good stuff, you're doing it right. If you're not doing good stuff, you'll find out.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So that would be, I guess, my advice to anybody out there willing to do it. Try to get out there and grind. You got to grind. Don't give up. If you give up,
You're dead in the water.
you're dead in the water. If you keep moving, you will never fail. You will never fail. Your phone will ring. You'll keep moving. You're positive. You wake up. You don't lay in bed and say, I got to lay here until my phone rings. No, get up, go, be happy to go, engage people happily. And that phone will, manifest it. It will ring and everything will be all right.
There's a lot of advice in there and also strung throughout this whole conversation. So really appreciate all that. You've had a very full working career and just life in general. So
very fortunate.
You've learned a lot. So how can people get in touch with you if they are interested in seeing what you do and maybe utilizing your services?
So I have a website out there. It's cncwoodcutters.com. I'm on Instagram under the same name, CNC Wood Cutters. Facebook, I don't post much on Facebook. I've got a LinkedIn, personal and business out there on LinkedIn network. So yeah, Google's always a good way.
Yeah, that's how I found you.
Yeah.
Originally. Google.
I'm surprised. I have a niche. I have sort of a niche market, and there's not a lot of real people, more hobbyists doing what I'm doing versus a full-time career.
Right.
So that sort of creates a niche for me because I'm all in and I have the bigger industrial equipment. So, but yeah, Google's sort of my showcase of, go read what people write about me. It's honest. It's, I try to treat people right. And I make sure, if you do business with me, you're happy. And if you're not, we're going to make sure we figure it out. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Craig, thanks for being on the podcast. It's been a great conversation.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. And there you have it. It's been a fantastic conversation with Craig. It's been so cool hearing his story and all his advice and life experience. If you're interested in hearing other conversations similar to this, be sure to subscribe and follow the podcast. Until then, this has been the Bossless Path. Catch you next time.